Now, it's EcoFit Health TV with Brian Sellers and Kevin Davis, bringing ancestral health to your modern lifestyle.
Hey everybody, welcome to EcoFit Health Radio and EcoFit Health TV. We're doing kind of a combined recording here today for the podcast and the YouTube channel. We're doing a live broadcast of a discussion with Liliana Tosic about preventing, stopping, and reversing disease. And we're kind of short on time, and this is actually a pretty long one, so I think it's going to turn into probably a double recording where we'll do half now and half at another time. So let's just jump right on in. Liliana, welcome.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Hi. So I'll just start the presentation. I was invited to do this talk about chronic disease, cancer, for example, but I decided to do the full on talk about preventing, stopping, and reversing disease. I think that empowerment comes from understanding, first of all, what disease is. So my first slide, which I hope everybody can see, is just a Wikipedia's definition of disease. A disease is a normal condition affecting the body of an organism. It is a medical condition associated with specific symptoms. It may be caused by external factors such as infectious disease, or it may be caused by internal dysfunctions such as autoimmune responses. In humans, disease is often used more broadly, to refer to any condition. I'm sorry, I'm going to stop for a second. I'm hearing like a dish sound. I'm sorry. I'll just continue here. In humans, disease is often used more broadly to refer to any condition that causes pain, dysfunction, distress, social problems, and or that to the persons afflicted, or similar problems for those in contact with the person. Disease usually affects people not only physically, but also emotionally, as a contracting and living with many diseases can alter one's perspective on life and their personality. This is just the Wikipedia's definition of disease. But there is a variety of areas in which disease can manifest. There are four main types of diseases: pathogenic disease, deficiency disease, hereditary disease, and psychological disease. Pathogenic disease is something that we probably most often would consider to be any form of infectious disease, something that can spread from person to person, bacteria format of disease, or viruses, typically manifested as colds or flus. Deficiency diseases would be well, in history, known as deficiency of vitamin C or vitamin D, or scurvies or rickets or so forth. But those are more medically recognizable, but there's a lot of other functions there's a lot of other diseases that are manifested by deficiency, nutritional deficiency. Hereditary disease would be something that we would connect to our genetic predisposition. Someone may inherit certain genetic predisposition, and that would be considered hereditary. That goes for a lot of different conditions, a lot of chronic conditions, but cancer definitely falls into that category. And psychological diseases, which would be considered there's a large number of psychological illnesses or diseases, or disharmonies, but probably more acute and the least serious would be anxiety, depression, most well known, and largest amount of people struggle with those psychological illnesses. How do we have you ever stopped and pondered what an actual word disease means? So if you separate a dis-ease into sort of a two-word, it kind of starts to reflect what really means. Disease is not something that we necessarily have. It's an absence of something that we don't have. It depends on how we look at it. But it's an absence of well-being and ease that is disturbed, so-called homeostasis when it's when we are put out of balance in any format of the four that I mentioned, we will experience disharmony, which is described as disease. I sort of took out this from Dr. T. Colin Campbell and Thomas M. Campbell, and I really like their definition. Our food choices have an incredible impact not only on our metabolism but also on the initiation, promotion, and even reversal of disease, on our energy, on our physical activity, and our emotional and mental well-being, and on our world environment. All of these seemingly separate spheres are intimately interconnected. So I think that's sort of where it stands in a general global terms. Now if you wanted to, sorry, I'm going to have to remove this. Now if you wanted to look into disease states, there's the two known disease states, an acute and chronic illnesses. So acute conditions come unsuddenly, and they usually last relatively short periods of time, from a day to 2 days to maximum of a week to a few weeks of time, and typically they're expected to successfully resolve. For example, colds, flus, broken arm, food poisoning, and so forth. Chronic illness is considered, it is a condition that comes on gradually, and it lasts long periods of time or indefinitely, and it is not expected by medical care to successfully resolve. In fact, the conditions would gradually deteriorate and get worse till they consume a host. Okay, let me see if in my next, okay. Here is the list of chronic diseases, and yeah, I've sort of started with the most common ones for North American people: arthritis, asthma and allergies, cardiovascular conditions, diabetes, autoimmune conditions, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, digestive disorders like IBS, celiac, chronic renal disease, chronic liver disease, and cancer, as sort of a one in the top. That seems to be the most scary. This list can go on until it fills the book. So there's a lot of names out there. For example, autoimmune conditions, there is myriads of different formats of autoimmune conditions. And they are all considered to be a chronic illnesses or chronic diseases. Epidemiology. Epidemiology is the study of the factors that cause or encourage diseases. Some diseases are more common in contained geographic areas among people with certain genetic or socio-economic characteristics, or at different times of the year. Epidemiology is considered a cornerstone methodology of public health research and is highly regarded in evidence-based medicine for identifying risk factors for disease. So various different studies are done over the years to show which areas, which people are predisposed to specific diseases. And there is a lot of leads, but nothing's ever a concrete in that. Nothing's ever 100%, and works in 100% of the population. I'd like to talk a little about prevention. Prevention is based on understanding the workings of the body, regardless of the geographic origins, genetic predispositions, or socioeconomic factors. When we know how body works and we stop the insults to the nature of its function, body will reward us with good health. So the prevention really starts with understanding how disease develops, what disease really is, and as what we talked at the very beginning in definition of disease, it really is the absence of harmony or homeostasis. So when that is disturbed, then disease will start to form. So understanding that, that is the first step towards prevention. And that would be regardless of our geographic origin or genetic predispositions or socioeconomic factors. There's a lot of things that people can do that can, in fact, help them prevent chronic illness, even acute illness, but chronic illness is something that people are most afraid of and have the most impact on human quality of life. Prevent, stop, and reverse disease process. How? This in this slide, I'll just start with the same knowledge and principles that would prevent disease from forming will also stop its development when it has started. So the same process will reverse disease. So if we are, in fact, in the midst of a chronic illness, the same principles that we would use to prevent it would be the principles we would use to reverse it, just maybe more aggressively and with more discipline. How about established and entrenched disease, an illness that is almost part of us since we had it for many decades, and some from childhood. With information technology, it is becoming more and more clear that chronic disease is dynamic in nature. There are thousands of cases and testimonials of stage 4 cancer remissions, autoimmune illness remissions, heart disease remissions, and so forth. And I definitely can have testimonials of the people that I know and I worked with that have had an amazing improvements with the conditions that I just mentioned. And the medical system cannot explain the cure. In cases of alternative treatments, they call it a spontaneous remission, which means an unexpected improvement or cure from disease, which usually takes a different course. So oftentimes, if the people go off and they're given a life sentence and they choose to try something alternative and they survive despite the expectations of the allopathic medical system, usually that's called spontaneous remission. And oftentimes very difficult to really explain why it happens because it's not yet studied. In a large group settings. How our body heals itself. Body healing itself from chronic conditions may be a very foreign concept for many people. And I've experienced this with people when I'm talking about diabetes, for example, and when we are discussing, okay, so we will do the program and so that we can reverse the diabetes, and oftentimes that's the first time they actually hear that's even possible. We all have different bodies and different levels of toxic load. Different backgrounds and a different financial and social abilities. There will be a large variations in healing time, process that it takes, and specific needs for a specific person. However, there are many commonalities in how body heals, and so I'll just mention a few. Stopping the insult with external toxins, and those would be food, drinks, electromagnetic pollution. And I know that this oftentimes may make a person feel helpless because electromagnetic pollution is all around us, but there's ways that we can actually minimize it. And I will talk a little bit about that just after I read all of these steps. So stopping the insults with external toxins, which are foods, drinks, electromagnetic pollution. Stop the insults with internal toxins, automatic negative thoughts, which can be called ants, toxic relationships, toxic belief systems. Number 3, making sure you have regular exercise, healthy sun exposure, healthy relationships, which kind of goes into the second and it's a part of a second one, stopping internal toxins, but it's this is also very, very important, and it affects our immune system. Number 4, eat healthy whole foods. Plant your own garden towers. If you don't have a lot of space, I've seen people plant tomato plants and all various greens and herbs inside of their home, like in an apartment, in these garden towers. Organic produce whenever possible, and check EWG, which is Environmental Working Group. PDF guide, well, the printout I will give at the very end. It says here printout given at the presentation, but it is this is not person-to-person presentation, so it will be given later. But it basically what the guide, Environmental Working Group guide provides is the list of the high pesticide load vegetables or conventionally raised vegetables, and lower in pesticide load conventionally raised vegetables, so that you can make informed choice. Excuse me. You can make an informed choice when you are picking your produce, so that you can also save money, so that not everything needs to be an organic product. For example, bananas, avocados, onions, just off the top of my head, do not require to be organically raised. Therefore, they're very low in pesticides load, and so you can actually save some money by following and understanding where is the high pesticide load. The produce that are very high in pesticides would be strawberries, for example, because they're bottom dwellers. And dark green vegetables and leafy vegetables are highly pesticide, and because they are. I grow my own garden, and I know that they definitely are very very readily attacked by pests. I don't use pesticides in my garden. I use natural ways of deterring them, like garlic that sits in water and spraying that, but being careful not to burn the plant. But I know that garlic's not going to be poisonous to me. But when you're buying it in a store, you do have to consider that. I also wanted to address, I know a lot of what I talk being nutritionist would be about food toxicity and diet overall, general toxicity, but being holistic, really, I understand the whole concept that it's not just diet that can be toxic, that our environment can be extremely toxic, and living in a very high geopathic stress environment where there's a lot of electromagnetic pollution. Like everybody in a family, for example, has cell phones, and there's a Wi-Fi in a house, and there's a TV in your bedroom, and as innocent as that looks, in fact, we all need and depend on technology. And yes, I do have the cell phone, and yes, I do use this technology. But it's also very wise to minimize the exposure to these pollutants, because although they are considered to be a ionic version of pollution, they're still heating the cells, and they can still affect how our cells operate. And specifically, the targeted people would be children, because their cells are dividing a lot quicker. They're growing, so they should not really be exposed to a lot of cell or phone conversations. If you do have them on a phone, try to use the earphones, or limit the amount that they spend on it, and don't use them in the vehicles, like cars and small enclosed places. Don't have children really close to television sets. So at night, when everybody's sleeping, turn off your Wi-Fi, especially if it's only one switch button, which anybody can set that up. Those would all really contribute to lowering the electromagnetic pollution. And of course, being out in nature, not continuously, for people that have jobs that are 8 to 15 hours in front of computers, there's ways that they can also minimize their exposure, by having special screen savers that would block the radiation, making regular breaks away from the computer, and there's various reasons why that's beneficial, also for the posture, for overall health, for circulation, for mental clarity, and also for a loss of exposure. Stopping insults with internal toxins, talking about negative thought and toxic relationship, toxic beliefs. Obviously this can be extremely in detail topic, and some people in some very complicated situations need professional help in this area. But the general idea is to catch yourself, ruminating or worrying continuously, and finding an outlet to release the worry, and just have overall more healthy thinking patterns. and making sure that you regularly exercise. I mean, this is not a brain science. It's most people understand how important that is for health, but it is crucial to overall prevention of many of the chronic diseases. The older we get, the more it's important that we regularly exercise. Mostly because the longer we are around, the longer we had time to accumulate the toxins, and the sewage system that flushes out our toxins, which is lymphatic system, does not have pump like cardiovascular system has a heart. So we need to use muscles and movement and gravitational pull in order to extract these toxins out of the lymphatic system, and that's exercise. So exercise is not just, yeah, I know I need to be healthier, therefore I'm going to exercise. It really can do a lot more than just that. It can prevent chronic diseases. And I mean, there's various studies that show that lots of chronic diseases, including cancer, risks can be dramatically lowered by regular exercise. So all of these are quite important. So that's why I stayed on this slide a little longer. Then there is epigenesis, the new biology. Wikipedia defines the epigenesis as the changes in the gene expression due to the mechanisms other than changes in DNA sequence. This may be a news to a lot of people that haven't heard of epigenesis or of the pioneers in this movement, Dr. Bruce Lipton. He's a cell biologist. The new biology, epigenesis, states that inheritable changes in a gene function can occur without a change in the DNA sequence inside of the nucleus of the cell. It describes how changes in our biology occur due what is experienced outside the cell, our environment. The cell biologist, Dr. Bruce Lipton, has pointed out that our basic genetic programming, such as our facial features, body morphology, eye color, handedness, and predispositions for certain illnesses, are all programmed or laid out in our first 8 weeks in utero. After the 8 weeks of the biological determinism, what happens outside the cell, environmental influences determine our genetic activity and what genes will be expressed. This is a radical reversal of the old view of genetic determinism, where we are a prisoner of our DNA. So basically our environment can, in fact, change the behavior of our DNA, and in fact, which parts of DNA will be expressed and active. Epigenesis, on the other hand, can be created by an individual influencing their own genetic printouts as a result of one's consciousness, a diet, toxins, social rituals, predators, sexual clues, all of which can affect gene expression. So our environment has a large amount to do with the formation of disease, according to the modern new biology or epigenesis. And it's a field that I highly encourage you read about, and it's very interesting. It's not necessarily important that you believe the hypothesis of it. Diet and epigenetics appear to be closely linked. I thought this was very interesting. I found sort of a link in one of the researches. The most well-known example is that of the Abouti mice. They are yellow, fat, and prone to diabetes and cancer. If Abouti females are fed with a cocktail of vitamin B12, folic acid, and choline directly prior to and during pregnancy, they give birth to mainly brown, slim, and healthy offsprings. The offsprings will also have offspring similar to themselves, brown, slim, and healthy, and these epigenetic changes will carry on for at least, if not more than, 3 generations without any additional changes. So that is very interesting in the research, and that kind of connects and that idea or notion of epigenetics, that if we are exposed to a healthier diet in utero, we actually may express the genes that may prevent disease down the road. So biology plus belief. This is also very interesting study that I found from Harvard psychologist Dr. Judith Rodden in 2007 study recruited 84 maids who cleaned rooms in hotels. Dr. Rodden wanted to examine the differences between physical exertion and physical exertion plus belief. And so the 84 maids were divided into two groups. One group heard a brief presentation explaining that their work has many benefits and qualifies as a good exercise. The other group, the control group, got no information and business as usual. Over next 30 days, the changes in the bodies of the women who heard the exercise lecture were significant. The exercise-informed women perceived themselves to be getting markedly more exercise than they had indicated before the presentation, and they also lost on average about 2 pounds, lowered their blood pressure by almost 10%, and displayed drops in body fat percentage, body mass index, and waist to hip ratio. Very interesting how what they believed influenced their biology, and just actually proves the notion of the epigenesis. Okay, self-talk and epigenetics. What would happen if we were more proactive in changing the background music of our ongoing inner dialogue or self-talk as we perform our daily routines, filling our minds with positive images of well-being and produce an epigenetic environment that reinforces the healing process. And that is something like, for example, visualization, meditations, and self-hypnosis. In medical stuff, I'm not talking about the stage hypnosis, which sometimes it's actually quite freaky, but a medical self-hypnosis in which the patient or client is fully conscious of the conversation with their practitioner, and the practitioner goes through this series of relaxation talk, and they fall into this relaxed state through which they basically just talk about more positive behavior. And this, in fact, they have shown has been very helpful in, for example, quitting smoking, losing weight. So it supported people on that path. So the self-talk does matter in terms of development of disease. Steps that will help regain wellness: positive mindset, belief that you can get better. That is very, very important, and I have seen this numerous times. Organic, non-processed, healthy, and mostly plant-based diet, but I did do this talk a while back, and I do believe that actually a well-balanced, overall healthy diet with plants and properly raised or wild meat is also falls into this category, but it does need to be non-processed, organically raised, and healthy. Exercise, aerobics, strength training, interval training, stretching, weights, all of the above, and more. Any exercise that really works for you. And sometimes at the beginning, just to get started, it's good to have a professional help with this as well. Superfoods and antioxidants, sun and fresh air. And this topic can go on, and I am not going to have a lot of time because I know a lot of people are very sun shy and maybe afraid of the sun, but there's ways to do it healthy. But sun does help us synthesize the vitamin D, and we do need a healthy exposure to the sun. And I do believe in getting it through natural means rather than having to always supplement with vitamins. And then toxic elimination, like geopathic stress, junk food, automatic negative thinking patterns, so eliminating all forms of toxins, whether that be stress, food, or negative self-talk, and last but not least, but very important, understanding that health takes commitment, that health takes decision and commitment and discipline, so that those are very important things to bring about. So with this, I will just wrap it up. I'm not sure if David and Kevin and Brian have questions in regards of this presentation. I'm just going to open it up. I don't have a lot of time. I may have a couple of minutes. We can talk about this more next time.
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I was just going to say thanks, Liliana. I would love for you to come back on with us again. And one of the things that I've learned about working with anxiety clients over the last 6 years, including my own recovery, if we feel like we're neglecting our health, we're going to feel trapped. And in feeling trapped, we're going to cause stress hormones. Stress hormones stimulate our body. And so we get into that cycle by feeling like we're neglecting our health. And I think, the more that we can understand and really, have a plan in place, the less anxiety we feel over health. So please, please, please come back on with us again and share some more related to this.
Absolutely, yeah, I would be happy to. I actually have 5 minutes for questions, and I'll have 5 minutes left before the session. So there's a little bit of a buffer. So if you or Kevin have a question, and I know I just threw a lot of information out there, and there's a lot more depth to this than this was just sort of main points towards what really is required to prevent, and in case if need to, reverse an illness.
Yeah, I mean, definitely we can maybe talk just a little bit about it today, and then I'm thinking it might be good if we do a lot more of the in-depth stuff and the questions with this on, the second. We were talking about doing this as a two-part kind of a series.
Okay.
Obviously, I'm very interested in the epigenetic part of this. I've done a little bit of reading related to that. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the book Deep Nutrition.
No.
But that's one that definitely goes into a lot about epigenetics and how especially nutrition can affect our gene expression in a positive way. So I'm definitely very interested in that aspect of it. I mean, would you say that the epigenetic side here is really kind of pretty important as far as the prevention of diseases, especially like some of the cancers and some of the chronic type things that people are seeing a lot today?
I would say that it's a large part of it. There's other elements that I mentioned as idiopathic stress and electromagnetic pollution. Also influences our cells and how they divide and how they work. Technically speaking, the electromagnetic fields and radio waves shouldn't be harmful to humans, and they're not if they're in moderation. But the problem is when we have a large amount of it continuously and being bombarded for long periods of time. That's when it becomes a problem, because what they do, their nature is to heat up. They move very quickly, and their nature is to heat up, kind of similar to what microwave does, but in a lesser amount. So that in connection to, let's say, cell phones. So having the cell phone next to your head, it's so close to the brain, and continuously talking on for many, many hours can be a problem. And health issue. But having a cell phone and safely using it, for business or whatever you're using it for, I believe it's not a major problem if everything else is properly aligned and balanced. If the person is overall healthy, they're eating good, healthy, clean diet, they're exercising, they're overall positive people, they have a good stress management, then they would be less of an impact. What I'm noticing is the people that are very highly anxious, and they have the central nervous system extremely activated, or highly sensitized. They are a perfect example. Those are the people that usually tell me that they don't, ever since they became so anxious that they're starting to notice that spending time on cell phone or being in front of computer is causing them more symptoms. And at that point, the doctors are not listening to them anymore, because they usually, by that point, are either considered hypochondriacs or because they complain about a lot of things. The thing, and they often find some form of validation when I say to them, yeah, that's very likely to happen, because when their central nervous system is activated, it's a messaging system. It's an electrical system in our body. So if you have a lot of electromagnetic movement the very sensitized system would feel it a lot more than non-sensitized system. So those people can be a little bit more bothered by electromagnetic pollution than an average person who is not struggling with that particular problem. And often people aren't aware of the damage, and that is the kind of a little bit of an insidious nature of that. That is important, I think, to just as explain or as understand as much as the gene expression and epigenesis and how our nutrition can actually, regardless of our predisposition, we may have predisposition towards heart disease, but we will never develop it if we have a healthy diet and healthy lifestyle. And I firmly believe that. That we are not imprisoned by our genetics. But our belief system, if we believe that that's the case, that can be a bit of a hindrance for improvement, because we need to believe that we can improve. That is an important ingredient in healing from an illness, specifically chronic illness. If I'm dealing with someone who has cancer, if I'm dealing with someone who has MS, or if I'm dealing with someone with Parkinson's, they need to believe, not right at the beginning, but they need to start to believe that the healing is possible. It is an important ingredient.
Yes, and I think this is kind of a good point to start thinking about wrapping it up for today. There's definitely a lot more that we can go into about this, and I'm thinking for the next one we should maybe start out by talking a little bit about what your kind of background is with working with this, why you're so passionate about it, some of your experiences, and then I'd love to next time get into some tips on things people can do to reduce that electromagnetic toxic load that's coming in. Things like moving the cell phone away from the head of your bed at night when it's charging, that type of stuff. And then some tips, just overall for prevention. Because I know we've had some specific questions come in related to what to do about diet and lifestyle for folks that have been diagnosed with cancers. So.
And I also want to invite people that are listeners, if they have questions, to send them along, because I'd be happy to answer the questions.
Yeah, and they can send those questions on to me, Kevin at ecofitmobile.com. You can certainly head over to the website and find out more about Liliana, find out about what we're talking about here, and that's at ecofitmobile.com, of course. Thanks for listening today, guys. If you like what you hear, be sure to head over to iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you're listening to this at and leave us a rating and a comment. And definitely make sure that you share this with a friend, because that is how we spread the word. So thanks again for listening, and we will talk to you next time.